Australia, a land untamable and utterly unique. In both its fauna and wildlife, it is one to be respected and occasionally feared, but ultimately to be looked at with a lens of beauty. If you pay attention to Australian films, more so of those considered to be high class, you'll notice they often share a trait of making Australia not just the background, but a character within itself, whether it be one to fight against the colonizing English, of whom attempt to bring an unwanted civilization into its chaotic yet ordered ecosystem, or one to provide to those who accept it as an equal and respect the beauty of a location unlike any other. The general theme of Australia as a character is that it is a land greater than those that live in it. It will give to those who accept themselves as a part of the land, and leave those who wish to control it as a stranger in a landscape they cannot understand. Australia as a character is something of higher belief and thought, almost as a spiritual idea. Whereas what is seen as a stereotypical Australian character would not care for higher thought. The most common trope of Australianness is that of the larrikin everyman, one who is vulgar, anti-intellectual, has a dialogue mostly of slang, values the idea of masculinity greatly, and will indulge in excess as not a problem but as an expectation. He's also one who is lovable due to his down-to-earth nature, and despite his rough edges, is generally harmless and often fits into the masculine hero archetype due to his relationship with himself and his community. He Died with a Falafel in his hand explores these ideas of its protagonist Danny, who is a character stuck in stillness between two worlds. He is one that lives in cities that become characters themselves through their noticeable distinctions of scene and theme. But unlike the human characters around him, he is rarely connected to them, for he is constantly on the move between sharehouse to sharehouse. Danny exists amongst the larrikin world, one of cigarettes, crude jokes, excess, male bonding, and a care for no establishment other than mateship, but diverges himself from his others due to his desire to be a writer of intellectual worth, like those that decorate the wall above his Underwood typewriter, the same one used by Kerouac and Hemingway. But amongst these black and white images of artists and scholars rests a VB coaster, to show that although Danny has these intellectual values, he is grounded in a world that does not value them. This idea of intellectual division is explored even further for Chekhov's gun, Danny's saving grace from an overwhelming debt and possible jail time being a check from Penthouse magazine for a throwaway story of smut briefly mentioned at the start of the film. Not only does Danny's success come from his brief acceptance of the value of vulgarity in the culture in which he lives, but it is not even a success that could be seen as a win in most cultures, but instead an escape from tragedy, one imposed on him by figures of authority and establishment. For the Penthouse check does contain $25,000, but at the point in which it arrives, he owes $24,979 to three different figures of establishment. Yet despite his prize being only $21, we as an Australian audience can still view it as victory, for the underdog's battle against higher powers, which may not even result in a victory, is a story that's rooted in Australian history and Australian culture. We only need to look at Ned Kelly of the Anzac to see how greatly Australians value the defiant act of just giving it a go, as long as it's against those who hold power and control over us. And generally throughout our history, it has been the British, and such is the case with the first figure of authority we're introduced to, as he has a strong British accent.
I wonder if we might have a few moments of your time.
Through the common use of the word fascist throughout the film.
You're a fascist bitch.
You're the fascist, Dirk.
I am not a fascist, Nina.
We can see all characters do not want to be controlled and have a disdain for any type of authority. With this value being placed so high in Australian culture, one may question why Ian the Socialist is played off as an annoying character rather than a friend. His purpose in the film is mostly to show the legitimate dangers of authority and how helpless one is against them.
Fight the power, Daniel. Fight the power, Ian.
But despite sharing one of the only values all characters in the film have in common, he's never able to be seen as a mate, I propose this is due to him caring too much about the anti-establishment value, and as is the case with the Australian culture, this means he is not laid back or carefree. He openly desires to be an intellectual, and attempts to spark political discussion with his housemates to no response. Whereas Danny does value the idea of intelligence, he rarely imposes it upon others, and ultimately, Ian's character is emasculated and then shot for caring too much, and not fitting into this archetype. He Died with a Falafel in his hand explores many aspects that are valued highly in Australian culture, but none more so than the power of mateship and the laws at which it works in. However, it both exists in and subverts the masculine nature of Australian mateship. With our opening scene, the Brisbane housemates of number 46, the most larrikin of all three houses, are discussing Reservoir Dogs and the possible homosexual nature within the final word said between two characters. "I love you, man." They discuss whether it is said as a confession of sexuality or just what a dying character says to another mate. Milo is almost offended by the suggestion that one of his favourite films may possibly contain homosexual themes. However, this fear of the line between homosocial and homosexual relationships is not represented by the movie at large, as a reoccurring back and forth throughout the film is for Flip to tell Danny he loves him, to which Danny responds, "I love you too, Flip." Despite Flip being a character and friend whose death is not only the story's darkest moment, but even takes up the title of the film, his relationship with Danny is either on par with, or possibly less than Danny's with Sam. Sam is the only character in the film who matches Danny intellectually and continues to stay in his life. They even have a story arc that can be seen in many mateships in Australian films, of competition with the final outcome being the two valuing each other equally to turn on a third party and achieve victory in true mateship. In this case, it involves both of their desires to be with Anya, the mysterious Wiccan vegetarian who quotes pop culture but in an accent that makes one assume they are from scholarly texts, and how ultimately they realize that Anya is a destructive force that is tearing their friendship apart. I am torn between the film's portrayal of mateship between man and woman, for despite Sam being portrayed as one of the boys and Danny's best mate, as although her first attempt is denied, they sleep together despite Danny's explanation of the unwritten laws of mateship. I feel this was an attempt to create a plot point responsible for more chaos in their lives, despite it being suggested that more difficulties were to ensue regardless, as there is an overlap between the laws of mateship and what the Melbourne police calls the laws of order.
And we don't want it happening to us, now do we, Daniel?
However, it nearly comes off as a setup for an inevitable romantic conclusion between the two, which stripped itself of portraying Sam as a mate, instead of as a female who will become a love interest, and the object of victory through denying mateship, as done similarly in Romper Stomper between the two leads. The film does not end with Sam and Danny getting married, as is suggested throughout as an ongoing joke, but instead with a familiar shot of Danny, guitar in hand, walking with Sam from Share House 49 to an unknown destination of what we can only assume will become Share House 50. We do not feel sympathies for Danny or Sam to be stuck in a cycle of poverty, but instead are glad that their relationship has been cemented as a true mateship. For in a state of stillness, struggle or chaos, the Australian will be fine as long as they have their mate.